oh, like, oh, right, I'm in a stress response. Like, this is freeze. I know I can do something about that.
Yes,
Like,
the first step is being aware of what's going on inside you and internally. And like you said, being able to change. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today here on Thrive Over Survive, the series to help you live your day-to-day life in a way that thrives, not just survives, so that you can love your life and heal from trauma. So I'm so excited to have my guest here today with me, Casey Hall. She has she has spent the past 13 years fine-tuning her passion for helping people improve their relationship with themselves. She began her career teaching nutrition and physical activity to children and adults with disabilities and was even a high school sex ed teacher. Then Casey went on to teach corporate wellness on a large scale, focusing on disease management, weight loss, and holistic stress management, because who doesn't have stress in their life? As an entrepreneur, Casey understands how hard it can be to slow down, take care of yourself, and make time for relationships. Through spending 2 years getting certified as a sex, love, and relationship coach, she realized that forming a healthy relationship with your body is a huge missing piece to the wellness equation. Casey is now a full-time healthy sensuality coach. She's co-creator of the Love School and co-hosts the podcast Slow the F Down Show with Elizabeth Menzel. And I'm so excited to have Casey touch upon all of that she brings to the table and her expertise, because it is such an important tool, as we were talking before the recording, for women or men who have gone through abuse. It is sometimes hard for them to reconnect with themselves and also manage their stress. And we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. So I will let Casey go through and tell us a little bit more of how she got to this point and how did you discover sex, love, and relationships as a coach, and how did that what made sense for you to do that?
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm just excited to be here with you and Lila.
Thank you. Yes, everyone, Lila. In case you're
Yeah.
new to this show, this is Lila.
Just need like a cuteness overload in your life.
Yes.
Um, yes. So how I became a sex, love, and relationship coach is a fun journey. I think it's always interesting how we end up where we are.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But yeah, as you mentioned in the intro, I've always been interested in wellness, and that started off as a health and physical education teacher for kids with disabilities, and I went on to work with adults with disabilities and exercise science. Then I ended up in corporate America teaching corporate wellness somehow, right?
Everyone has their corporate story at some
Right.
point.
Well, weight loss and disease management and healthy eating, and I loved all of that. And it gave me a ton of knowledge and information experience, but it felt like there was something deeper that I was wanting to get to really help people, like at the core.
Yeah.
So I asked around and people were like, what about stress? And I was like, everybody has stress, as
Yeah.
you mentioned. And so I got my certification in holistic stress management and really started to make the majority of my coaching around that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because it's still relevant. Pre-pandemic, 90% of doctors related visits were due to stress related symptoms, and that was pre.
Yeah, before we
Right.
had a lockdown and a bunch of global events triggering people that they didn't even know could be
Exactly.
triggered, or feeling trauma that they didn't even know they could feel.
Right. And so it's just, it's still super relevant. But even with that experience with stress, I was like, you know what? There's still something more. Like there's something that is like one layer under that for me that I could get to that could help people. And that's when I found the Love, Sex, and Relationship certification.
Right.
And when I found that, I was at a point in my life where I was in a very loving, healthy relationship with someone. Like if you could have just like checked off the boxes, like life was good overall, like no complaints.
Yeah.
But noticed that even in this healthy, loving relationship, there was this part of me that just felt empty and numb and disconnected.
Yeah.
And it was primarily during intimacy. And I remember being like, I'm like broken. I think I'm just broken. Everything is fine, and I must be broken. I'm the one who can't be fixed. And so, that was at around the same time that I found the love, sex, and relationship coaching certification. And I started taking it. And it was a year-long certification. And through that, I discovered that I wasn't broken,
Right.
and that even though I thought that I had done so much processing of my trauma, that there was actually a part of trauma that people don't talk about that still stays in the body and it lives there.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I learned that was there and how to process it, and changed in a good way so much, as a person, and in my ability to feel connection to my partner during intimacy, feel connection to myself, that I was like, this is it. This is that center thing that like I've been looking for, that is really at the center of what I want to do in wellness. And so that's how I got into it. I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years now, and I
Yeah.
love it.
So when you talk about that core piece of the trauma, because obviously that's a core piece of this show, is people are listening and tuning in because they do have trauma, either from physical abuse or emotional abuse, domestic or sexual abuse, any type of abuse. I actually had a guest I interviewed earlier in the week, and they were like, abuse is just one word, but there's so much that goes into it, and there's so much that goes into trauma. It's also one word, but there's so many layers and definitions of what can be considered a trauma. So how did you identify? I know you mentioned that you had trauma before, but how did you identify that that was still in your body? I know like that was part of probably through the certification, but kind of what led you to identify that for people who maybe are like, I don't know if that's in me right now still.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So my body is what led that. In my mind, I understood that I had PTSD from
Okay.
trauma as a child. I knew that,
Okay.
but how my body responded to that trauma was to build an armadillo shell around my whole body.
Right.
And so at times during intimacy, or sometimes just during random times when I would feel triggered about something, it was like I would go into the stress freeze response, because that's my go-to, freeze or faint. And then the shell would come up and I couldn't feel anything. And so my body was telling me what I was feeling. It was the numbness. It was the lack of sensation. I mean, I could literally do this and just barely feel anything. It was like I was, I remember going to the doctor and getting neurologically checked out to make sure, like, I didn't have nerve damage, or there wasn't some type of, it was nothing. I mean, nothing on the physical level like that. It was all trauma based. And so step one was finding safety, getting good at finding safety in my now environment. Like right now, I'm safe in this room. I'm physically safe in my home. I'm not under a direct threat. So just having like that truth,
piece. That truth.
Yeah, that truth piece, be like, oh, right, okay, cool, I am safe in this moment. And then
and I think a lot of people struggle
with
that. I mean, Casey and I were talking about before we hopped on, I had a moment to this morning even, and I was like, I was triggered. My body went into my response, and, I could tell myself 1,000 times, I'm safe. I'm not in that place where I was being abused, but sometimes sometimes you have to take a lot of deep breaths to remind yourself of that.
Yeah. And even that step, like you said, even that first step, it takes a while, because you can understand logically, yes, like logically, I know. Like logically, you can tell, like, well, I know right now I'm in my home, I'm safe, there's no one actually coming to get me, my doors are locked. Like I can feel that logical safety, but bringing the body on board is
Mhm.
it's another layer of it. But the body, in order for the body to feel safe, there has to be that safety first. And so,
Yep.
you know, my body's actual lack of sensation or numbness was actually what cued me in.
Okay.
So that, and then I was able to be like, okay, well, why is this here? Like, why is this here? And then it was like, oh, yeah, Case, you have trauma. At some point, this was your body's defense mechanism that it used to keep you safe. Right. And so there's nothing wrong with my body. My body actually did exactly what it's supposed to do in that situation, which was to keep me safe. But
Right.
now that that threat's done,
Over.
and I'm at a place where, you know, I am actually safe. Now my body's still not on board. It still hasn't like gotten the memo. So I had to really just work with it and work with these sensations, and through breath work and practices, like, was able to very slowly reestablish that relationship of trust with my body and sensation.
Right. And are there are for the audience and for people who aren't as familiar potentially with this, you mentioned how your body reacted in a certain way. Are there consistent types of reactions that your body can have that people can look for to also like um identify? Maybe it's not just their body shutting down, maybe it's their body is, I don't know what their other possibilities could be.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, um, your stress response,
Mhm.
you know, it's your body's built-in defense mechanism to let you know that, you know, there's danger or there's a threat. And so everybody responds to stress differently. There's fight, flight, freeze, faint.
Okay.
Um, so, you know, flight looks like I got to get out of here, right?
Right.
Um, fight is I want to defend myself.
Mhm.
Um, freeze is literally that tension in the body where you feel like you can't move.
Yeah.
Uh, and then faint, this is my other go-to. I'm a freezer and a fainter.
I've
Faint,
never even heard of that one.
it's it's when um it's when you suddenly feel very tired and like you want to go to sleep, but you're not actually tired. So like, um this happens to me a lot during my work day. If I'm like, okay, you know, I have this lot to do today, and if I start piling it on, or if I start to get super behind and I feel overwhelm will put my body into faint. So my thoughts will start being like, I have to do, and it hits this threshold where my stress response is triggered of overwhelm, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I could just take a little nap right now. Like maybe I can just lay down and maybe I'll just take it. And
I can
then,
relate to that so much.
but I'm not actually tired. Like I
Yes.
got enough sleep the night before. So I'm like, maybe
Yep.
a faint response, or am I actually tired right now?
That's such a good thing to be aware of because, like, sometimes I am tired because I have a newborn, but then there's other nights I'm like, I know I got enough sleep. So what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
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 And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that when they're under duress. And um, I know people with depression, they also kind of suffer from that type of response where they're just like, I need to shut down, I need to take a nap, or they just like struggle
Yeah.
to leave their bed.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's really like, I've found that even just becoming more familiar with the stress responses, like your own stress
Mhm.
responses, because everyone's are totally different and it changes over time,
Yeah.
feels really empowering, because it's like, oh, right, this is how I feel. Oh, like, oh, right, I'm in a stress response. Like, this is freeze. I know I can do something about that.
Yes, you
Like,
have the
you
first
know,
step is being aware of what's going on inside you and internally. And like you said, being able to change, like talk to yourself in a way that is like, I'm gonna change this. I need to feel grounded, like regain control. And it's okay to give yourself that grace of like a few moments to feel if you need to feel.
Right. Right. And there's almost this like stress isn't good or bad per se. Like it's a
Yeah.
built-in mechanism to keep us alive and
Yes.
and safe. And so it's kind of cool too to have that relationship and be like, oh, my body is responding. My body's doing its job and being like, oh, okay, but I'm a um, you know, human who has the conscious choice to what to do in this situation. And but
Yeah.
it's, it's not making the body the enemy. It's kind of like recognizing it and then working with the body, being like, oh, okay, I feel like you're telling me that you need something here, and I'm gonna help you out.
Right. And like you said, stress can be good. It's not good or bad innately. Like there's too much stress that can um this is just something I've seen and read recently about your brain, I guess, will, if it's in too much of that overdrive of that fight or flight, it like can actually be damaging. And that is actually kind of why it's so easy for people to gaslight, is because eventually they, like, that is what will cause that short-term memory loss that happens with gaslighting, and it makes it easier for them to say like, oh, you don't remember this, like, and twist everything, because there's such in that fight or flight sense when there's can be good stress of, oh, I got a lot of work to do, I need to get it done, like, or a little bit of stress to get you motivated, but
Yeah.
isn't life threatening.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, what you just said about the short-term memory. I'd be curious to learn more about that too, because I remember that was a judgment on myself that I had initially when I started to remember my trauma. I was like,
Hmm.
why didn't I remember this before? Like, because it started to come back in flashbacks. And I
Yep.
was like, oh, only like war vets have PTSD flashbacks. Like,
Oh.
that no, that is not
Mm-mm.
true. Um, and so
I
I,
still
I
will have flashbacks of like being
yeah,
triggered and being in through abuse, or just, in those high tense situations. And this was just a video I saw online that I need to dig into it more, but I guess it has to do with your brain makeup.
yeah,
Like when you're in that, if you're in that state too long, it's damaging to your memory. Like it's whatever I don't know the exact term, so I can't speak too much about it, but it damages your like your short-term memory in your
yeah.
brain.
It makes sense. I mean, I would check out,
Yeah.
check
Sorry,
out
not
because
to derail us, because there's so much more too that we have to
no,
discuss
no,
about
I
just
think it's great.
sensuality in the body that's beyond the brain, because I think, you know, sex, love, and relationships is such a key piece of healing from trauma, because a lot of people have trouble loving themselves when they're coming out of trauma. And then, like you said, intimacy when you are safe and when with that new partner, people do feel like I'm never going to be able to, or they have a hard time because they might have been, because sometimes it's not, like you mentioned, a direct correlation of I was sexually abused, so I have a hard time finding that intimacy. It could just be your response, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, and noting that it's okay. Um, so for those that are listening, what are maybe some tips that you can provide for those when they're like they're finally aware that this is going on with them, and they're ready to take those steps of, I want my life to be different, and
Mhm.
like heal that piece with them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say the first thing is know that you're not broken,
Mm,
that there's nothing wrong with you.
yeah.
And I mentioned a little bit before, but really just wanting to highlight that, like, whatever blocks that your body has towards intimacy, they're there for a reason. Your body put those up because it cares about you,
Yeah.
and it was trying to protect you and to keep you safe. And so just really understanding that piece, because the most helpful approach that I found to this is like you're working with your body in this healing process. You know, you're not against it. And so really just understanding that the messages that your body is giving you through sensations that are coming up, or whether it's a stress response or whether it's something else, it's all information. Your body is trying to talk to you. It has a ton of wisdom, which continues to blow my mind. Blows my mind. As a ton of wisdom, and the idea is to work with it as you heal. And so I think sometimes, well, I'll speak for myself, I had this attitude that my body was always against me, and that one of the reasons that I couldn't heal was because I was numb, or I couldn't feel, or like I was no, like your body is just doing its job, and it's your job in the healing process to learn how to work with it.
I think that's such a good point that you bring up, because I've never thought about it like this. I mean, I look at data that way of like, oh, it's information. Like a lot of the clients I help with, we in their businesses, we talk about data is just a way for you to see like a health metric within your business. And this is just a metric for your body to gauge like where it's at. And, you know, your body didn't always do this. It doesn't mean it has to stay that way forever. Like, I think that's such a good piece to bring up and raise, because some people put so much blame on themselves, and they say that they're like you did, that they are the problem or they are broken, and they just beat themselves up over it, which is not the answer either. I'm very guilty of that too, of like, I'm the problem, I did this, but
Yeah,
you have to heal also that relationship within you as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say to that piece too is, you know, and I'm thinking of like what I would have gone back and told a younger version of myself.
Love that.
It's like obviously you and your body, same team.
Yeah.
And you deserve support. You deserve support. And I think a lot of times just that, like, the mind can come up with so many reasons why you don't need support. You know, other people have it worse. There's no one who's going to understand you. You don't know what to do. There is support. There are so many people all over the globe that are here as a support for you in whatever way that you're needing. And it's just like that permission that like you're deserving of support. And not only are you deserving of it, but we need support. There's no way that any of us can get through healing and life totally on our own. And so that's the part there too. So for the people who really need to hear that, like, you deserve support and you're worthy of it. Oh, I think you're muted there for a sec.
Can I pause?
Oh,
I'm
sure.
gonna pause the recording really quick because I really like that point. But she's screaming, I'm gonna grab her a binky, and then I will catch back up with that. I'm so sorry. 1 second.
Go for it.
Okay, so you talked about how there's so much there to discuss, and just like so many good points in case anyone watching. I think from dealing with trauma and abuse and having, you know, someone who's looks back and sees mistakes, a lot of us who have been in that personal relationship, or you're in an abusive relationship of any kind, you know, you feel like it's your fault or not worthy of support. So I think what Casey just said really hits home, and is something a lot of people should hear, and unfortunately they don't hear it enough, in a lot of the places that they're going to rebuild their life, because some people aren't equipped to handle the trauma or provide that support. So, and that's the whole point of this show, is to help get you in touch with the resources like Casey and other guests who understand what you're going through, and who understand trauma, and understand abuse, and PTSD. There's just like, there's so much that goes into it, but you are worthy of support. You are worthy of having a normal life. You are worthy of having a loving life. Just because you make one mistake or one bad judgment call, it doesn't mean you can't fix it. And turn your life around. So I think that's such a great message to bring to light. And we were talking earlier too about your podcast, the Slow the F Down Show, and that there's some episodes that viewers could listen to that are also good resources outside of the programs and the Love School that you offered. In case anyone's like, this is a new concept to me, or they're very early on in that healing process. What are some maybe shows that you could recommend to those listening that are good are resources in the beginning process?
Yeah. We created my business partner, whom I love, created a podcast. She has 35 years of experience as a healer. I have 15 years of experience as a coach.
Right.
So we just combined everything that we knew into these different episodes. And what we found is that in order for in all of the thousands of people that both of us have ever worked with, we've never once helped people heal by speeding up. It's always required slowing the F down.
Yeah, everyone's rushing.
Right? Healing, is so. With that being said, that's why we named the podcast Slow the F Down. And so we have it with different topics. So Slow the F Down with speed healing is actually one of them. A good place to start, Slow the F Down with stress. That episode gives practical skills, talks about how stress affects the body. And we do it in a way that's just like light and fun and kind of conversational. The other one I think would be really helpful would be Slow the F Down with denying you need help.
Right.
And, before when I mentioned, like, I had that epiphany moment when I was in my partnership and just being like, wow, I feel empty. I feel disconnected from myself. I feel numb. What had also happened without me realizing it is that I got into this mindset of like, I have to do everything by myself. I'm my everything. And I kind of siloed myself. Like, I had friends, but it wasn't like, they were just friends that I fit in between like my super busy lifestyle. They weren't actually like these deep, meaningful connections. So not only was it affecting my intimacy in my sex life, it was affecting my ability to be like form deep relationships with friends. Yeah,
because you probably it's hard to trust sometimes after trauma and bring people in and not question all the time, like, are they gonna do this? Is this gonna happen? And I myself have gone through that of like, I don't want to bring anybody new in my life. And when I started my business, it was really hard for me to put myself out there because I was constantly worried, like, am I going to get taken advantage of again? Am I going to be treated like this again? What if people judge me? All those normal imposter syndrome and normal feelings that come up, but you're just heightened from the betrayal or the trauma that you've experienced. But realizing those people they're dealing with their own stuff first and foremost. You can't fix them. That's like the biggest lesson that I've learned. And if you're watching the show and you've seen a couple episodes, this topic comes up a lot. I know it's not your fault. You can't fix them. The best thing you can do is fix yourself and be there for your kids if you have kids in the situation, and give them the skills to cope. But also, oh, I totally forgot where I was going with that. That just hit home though. You don't have to silo yourself. You can make these connections because that's not the norm. Like, not everyone is out to get you. Not everyone is gonna hurt you.
Yeah. And I think, and I love it, like, that you brought that up too, because that was one of the reasons I was denying I need help. That's when it's Slow the F Down, denying you need help, because it's like all of those subtle subconscious things that you don't even realize are there until you do get help. And then you have that experience of like, oh wow, there are people who are able to help me, who are willing to help me. And then that kind of what I found in my experience is I ended up either just aligning to all new friends who I could really go deeper with, or like the friendships that I had, the one like that I was kind of like your ride or die friends, like those ones kind of got deeper, and then without any hard feelings, the other ones just kind of, the more surface level ones just fell to the wayside. And that experience of getting help has just permeated throughout my life. So now I have a professional support system. I have, a therapist, a somatic experiencing therapist, business coaches, massage therapist, my hairdresser totally counts.
Yes, they do count. They 100% count.
1000% count. But like I have the support, and I have these people in my life now that I can go to and are gonna be real with me, so that as I'm dating and as I'm finding new relationships, they're actually going to give me the truth of what they feel. So it's just a lot more of like it feels like the support has just spread out across everything.
Yeah, I love that you talk about having a support team, because especially if you've been isolated or siloed or through abuse, that's a big thing that I've talked about with other women, is in gaslighting and with isolation that comes through from that, whether that be a significant partner or family member, because there are people who have family members like that. Remembering that you can't trust your judgment, you can talk to people. Like, it took me a while when I was healing from everything, and I still run into this of, am I crazy, or am I remembering this right? It's not going to hurt you to have some people there as like sounding boards who aren't stuck in the middle and in that panicked fight or flight, like you mentioned before. If you're triggered, you can go to them with this is what's going on. I don't know how to like pick through it. And you personally have the say in, to step away. You can have that time. Like, you can make that time for yourself, like we were talking about, and do those exercises of getting control of yourself, your mental and physical senses. You don't have to. I think that was like one of the biggest things, is you don't have to respond all the time, or you don't have to engage.
Yes.
And sometimes it's obviously easier said than done.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's where that awareness of the stress response is like, oh, I'm being triggered. I'm in a freeze. When I'm in a freeze response, I can't respond.
Mm-hmm.
I can't respond. And so even just being able to say, hey, I'm needing a little bit of time before I respond. Just saying that to someone, or not responding.
Yep. And with people who don't respect that, that's clear red flags, because my ex is still like that when we co-parent, where I won't respond, or I will respond very simply, and it's still trying to pick a fight or trying to cause an argument. And it's like, you're not respecting my boundaries. So, but then they also try to be like, well, I expect you to go above and beyond and respect my boundaries. I know a lot of people who have to deal with. So maybe that's a good thing to talk about and like get some tips on for anyone who's dealing with that, where people aren't respecting their boundaries or their needs. Maybe what are some things that they can do? Whether that be they are away from their abuser and in a safe place, like a physical safe place, or if they're still in that situation and haven't left.
Yeah. Well, I think what you just alluded there, hold on, I'm gonna take a second to feel into that. I just felt the because of my work is somatic, I can really feel into the depth and the bigness of that question there too.
Yes, that was a pretty big loaded question.
No, it was good. It's a good one. The first thing, and we alluded to, is I would when people show you who they are, believe them. So if you are setting a healthy boundary and
Mhm.
somebody is continually not meeting that, and you're setting that boundary and you're saying it in a way that's clear and that's loving, and they're not meeting it, they're showing you that they're not willing to do that.
Yeah.
And if that is a pattern that keeps happening, again, people show you who they are through their actions, believe it.
Yeah.
Believe that. And
Believe the actions, not the words.
I think there's this other part too, in relationships, where when people do things that are different than how we would like them to be done, or when we like different things, there's a tendency to want to make someone right or make someone wrong.
Mm.
Where I think that a lot of that can be mitigated by looking at it through compatible or not compatible,
Yeah.
and just keeping it at that level. And so what I mean by that is like, if I'm dating somebody and my non-negotiable is that I don't date people who smoke. You know, I
Yeah.
coach people on COPD. My dad is COPD because of smoking. Like that's a non-negotiable for me. So
Yeah.
that is just an incompatibility.
Yep.
It doesn't make that person right or wrong who smokes. It's just not compatible. And so to get clear on what it is that you value in a relationship, and sometimes just holding, just looking at the compatibility factors of like, okay, well, let's look at what my values are, and
Yeah.
does this person match? Not even in a I'm right, they're wrong, but just, is it compatible? And letting that do a lot of the rooting out. Because if there's a lot of, I've found that had I done that in past relationships and not
Yeah.
tried to recognize, be like, well, we're not actually compatible. We're actually like, there's some things here that don't line up. But if I bend my mind around it, and if I lower
Yeah.
my boundaries, and if I just make excuses for why it could, maybe it can work. And it
Right.
doesn't. It
Right.
doesn't. It never does.
And I always look back at that and I'm like, why did I mean, core point of it is you want that love and you want that feeling of like acceptance. And I still know when I'm like my people pleasing tendencies are popping up, but it's like hindsight 2020 always. But why do we bend? That's I think the like the question of like, not that there's an answer, that you have the answer of, in a relationship, why do we bend so much for people? Like it's hard to sometimes set up those boundaries for ourselves, especially if you're not aware. That's like that was my big thing. And I think for so many younger people as well, if you're just starting out and you're like dating relationships, is no one talks about that. No one talks or teaches you what are your negotiables like before you like start dating. I
Yeah.
think that's a really good point.
I
To bring
work,
up.
I'm working right now on with a client on that same topic, and their response was like, no one's ever asked me that.
Mhm.
I don't know what my needs are. I don't know what my values are. And I was like,
Yep.
well, you're not alone. I had no clue either,
Yeah.
because we don't live in a society that teaches that. And so there's a tool. Have you heard of nonviolent communication before?
No.
So it was developed by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, and he um it's a way to communicate. I wish it was called like respectful communication, but it was developed a
Yeah.
long time ago, so it's called nonviolent communication. But
Okay.
and I'm not going to go into a whole teaching of that, but the part of it that I use in my own life
Yeah.
is there's a list of feelings,
Mm.
and there's a list of needs. And I literally have the list printed out, and I keep it in my purse. And because I work with clients, I want to practice what I preach, and this makes my life so much easier. And when I'm feeling a certain way, we tend to just be like, how are you feeling? Good. How are you feeling? Bad. But there are so many things with under good and with under bad. There's, I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling elated. There's all these different nuances, or I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling frustrated.
Yeah.
And when you can start to identify what the feeling is, what you realize is under every feeling is a need. So like 100% of the time, I'll give you an example. Anger, right?
Yeah.
If I'm feeling angry, my unmet need at that time could be, and has been, I'm not fed, so my blood sugars are low.
That's such a good one. Yeah.
Or I'm feeling angry because I'm not getting the respect that I need.
Right.
And so it's really cool to have that list side and side of like feelings and needs, because I can be like, oh, I'm feeling, and sometimes I can be feeling 3 different things. I'm feeling boom, boom, boom. Oh, because I'm needing boop, boop, boop. And when you identify what you need, then you're actually able to meet your own need a lot of the times. And be like, oh, I'm feeling angry because I'm hungry. I'm going to eat. And then guess what? Not angry anymore because my blood sugars came back to regular. So that tool, I cannot recommend that enough. It is something that I do with every single client. It's something that has changed my business relationship, my family dynamics, my romantic relationships. Like it's a powerful tool.
I'm going to have to look into that too. And you said that it's a tool. So the intent is to help you fulfill your own need, not you submit to the other person's, or like.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So it's a tool developed to help you communicate effectively with people, and do so from a place of self-ownership and self-responsibility.
Okay.
Right? Because we can't change how other people respond.
Yeah.
We can express our feelings, we can express what we're needing, and it kind of goes back to, that question, but we can't affect how people are going to respond, how they're going to respond. That's on them. All we can do is clearly state how we're feeling, what we're needing again and again, and then watch to see if that's something that's honored or respected. And if it is, great. If it's not compatible.
Right. I think my brain keeps going back to, just because this has been a topic on my heart, of my own personal experiences. And I know so many women and men who are, if there's a reason that you can't like get out of the non-compatible, like how would you recommend for that communicate? You might not even have the answer right now. This is just what came to mind of like with what you said of sometimes when some people won't respect those needs, but you still have to communicate with them. And how do you meet your own needs in that perspective of, I have my boundaries, and how do I communicate with this person without sacrificing myself and not causing an argument? Because I think that's what a lot of people experience when they're dealing with someone who are trying to co-parent with, or trying to like manage. That's really the basic one. I feel like the biggest one that comes up is co-parenting in that situation, which a lot of people unfortunately have to deal with. They can't just leave if they're not compatible, like, or it's too late to leave. Not too late. I shouldn't say that. You can always leave the situation and make yourself safe, but you might still have to deal with that person. And how do you do that? If you have any tips. If not, that's totally okay, because that might be outside of what you deal with in your practice. It's totally fine. That's where my thought process is like, how do you meet your needs for yourself and not break those boundaries when someone disrespects it? That you can't really like be like, oh, sorry, we're not compatible. As much as like, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known this stuff 5-10 years ago.
Totally. And I love that question too, because that's a very real situation where we're co-parenting. I can't be like, peace out. We're not compatible. What I would recommend in that situation is to get that list, NVC, and I can share and, share that with you,
Yeah.
and actually write down what feeling that you are feeling and what that unmet need is for yourself. There's a whole actual like script thing you can do if you want to like communicate, but
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't even go there. I'd literally just write down how you're feeling, what you're needing, how you're feeling, what you're needing, putting it down on pen and paper again and again and again. And then realizing, is that need something that you can meet for yourself to some
Yeah.
extent?
Yeah.
So let me try to think of an example. What is well, I can just do, what is an emotion that comes up for you often around that situation?
Fear.
Fear. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then what need is under that fear? Like, what do you need in those situations in order to feel less afraid or to feel less fear?
That's a very good question, because the fear stems from for safety for my child is usually where the fear stems from, and I think this is like an emotion a lot of co-parenting people can relate to, is if they're in a situation with the courts of maybe things aren't going the way they want, of how do I manage that fear or meet that need when I don't have full control maybe of
Right.
what's going on.
So then in that situation, safety, a need for safety is under that fear. And so one of the things you can do is, how can you meet the need for safety in yourself?
Mm,
How can you regulate your nervous system? What practices can you do? Can you do breath work so that you're showing up with as much safety as that is within your control, that you
yeah.
can cultivate while you're dealing with that situation?
Yeah. I think that's amazing advice, and it's something that probably gets overlooked a lot when
Mhm.
this is happening. And the fear of change a lot of people I think have to deal with. So grasping with what you can control.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not a perfect solution, but the reason that I
Mhm.
love is because it starts to feel so empowering too when you're like, yeah, I know that I'm capable of meeting this need to the best possible extent that I can. And
Yeah.
I'm doing everything that I can. And there's something just empowering in that, because in that situation, there's so much that is out of your control.
Yeah. And the best thing you can do is I think taking it back to that support team is, you might not have all the answers and you might not have all that you can, but creating a support team around you and your children that can
Thousand.
help you.
Yeah. And that safety might look like, oh, I need to call my support team. I need
Mhm.
to call a member of my support team.
Right. And
I
I
need,
think go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
No, that's it.
I think also just maybe having a support team for the child. That's been something that's been on my heart recently, is who can I put in place for their support team
Mhm.
when I don't have all the answers for them.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love, I love that idea too, of the support team for your child. I love that.
Because it's hard, especially when we don't know what to do sometimes. And sometimes that's the ownership that we have to take of, I don't know. So I'm going to reach out to someone that might be able to get me closer, instead of like, that's what you do have control over. You
Right.
have control of what's going on when they're with you, and you can provide them the tools that they need. For anyone listening, or because it's sometimes it seems so obvious, some things seem obvious, but until
Mhm.
you hear them elsewhere.
And I want one of the, you asked too in a previous question, what people would do who are still in a situation or still with a partner that they know is unhealthy or is unsafe. And I
Hmm.
would still recommend doing that process of, on your own, writing down notes in your phone, wherever feels good for you, how you're feeling in that unmet need, how you're feeling in that unmet need, how you're feeling in that, because what you're doing is you're getting to learn yourself and you're getting to validate your need to yourself again and again and again. This situation occurred.
Yeah.
Ideally, of course, if you're in physical harm, physical threat, you get out. But,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of us that have stayed in, I will speak for myself. I've stayed in relationships that weren't healthy.
Yeah.
And my mind did an amazing job of the mental gymnastics of coming up with every reason in the world of, oh, well, I guess I could still stay with him. But had I been able to have that list and literally just be like, okay, this happened and, you know, here's what happened. I'm feeling this way. This was the unmet need under that. And this happened. I'm feeling this way. I could have actually like had
Mhm.
some tangible thing for me to realize like, Casey, this keeps happening
Yes.
and this emotion keeps coming up to cue you that this unmet need is here. When are you going to do so, or what needs to shift in order for this need to be met? Because hey, maybe it is communicating it to that person and maybe they can do something about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're not going to know either unless you give them that opportunity. But if you do, and again, it's continually not respected and honored, it's just one way of like, so then when you
You
have
have a
that breakup
tangible.
speech, you know, it's like, boom, 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 this is what I've been needing. This is what I've been asking for. You haven't been needing this. And this is why I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so good too, because it doesn't all like one, it is hard if you're in physical safety sometimes to get out. There is like some complications. Like I will always promote get out when you can, if and when you can. If you can't, make it a safe exit. But
Yes.
you make a good point of there are relationships that aren't to that extreme that people will stay in, and they'll do the gymnastics and they'll do the bending and they will do everything because they don't have a concrete, like tangible way of being like, this is keeps happening. They just keep dismissing it. And I think it's so important if you do communicate that with your partner or the person that you have that relationship with. It doesn't even have to be a partner.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a mom, a brother, a sister, a friend, if they're not respecting that and won't change, or if they say they're going to change, because I've had that happen where you're like, I need this or this. And, um, they are like, oh, I'll change. And they'll do a little bit and then they'll go right back to, um,
Yes.
doing what they
Yes.
were before and seeing how much they can push your boundaries. That's another, I guess, I have coming on is she's a boundary coach. Specifically, like she works with a lot of people in trauma about boundaries within themselves and boundaries with others, but it's it starts with the boundary in you. Like you have to set that boundary up. And you, like what you said, I think that's an amazing tool to have, that you're documenting and journaling in a safe place where how many times this is coming up for you? And is
Right.
this really how you want to live your life? And
Yeah.
going back to the non-negotiables, like those are two very solid things that anybody can do at any point. And that aren't really talked about, which I think is fantastic that you brought them up for everyone watching, because boy, did I wish I had those tools 7 years ago.
Gosh, right. And even when I can think back to like my early 20s and dating and in college, you're just kind of like, wee.
Yeah,
Um,
you don't think about like, oh, what's compatible or not. You're like, I'm just gonna have
no,
fun.
right. You're just like, yay, whatever. There or those and I knew that something felt off, but they
Hmm.
didn't have the verbiage.
Yeah,
And if I would have had the verbiage, I could have identified it instead of just being like, "Yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know why that feels off or what my resistance is here. So I'm just going to be like, whatever.
you ignore it. Yeah.
Right. So that it gives it like a real tangible
Mm,
identity.
yeah, I think
Whether
that's
yeah,
so good.
yeah.
This, and these are things now that you've brought up. I'm like, I want to go research some more of this. And these are tools that like, it's not just good for us, but like teaching our children and like other people. I'm excited to do this practice with my daughter of like, I see you're feeling this way. Like, because that's a great parenting technique in and of itself of
Yeah.
what you're feeling this way, what need isn't met. And a lot of times with toddlers, like a lot of my mom friends will say, like, it's like what you said, blood sugar, or they need a snack, or they need a like they need something, or they just feel out of control and need to feel back in control, and like helping them deal with their needs and not becoming dependent on you to figure it all out for them too sometimes. It's like such a good tool. I'm excited to use that
Yeah.
going forward, especially.
Well, and I love that Lila's present on this call too, and that you just gave that example, because I've done this practice thousands of times now. I do it multiple times throughout the day where I check in with myself, take a couple breaths and go, when I notice I'm feeling an emotion that's stronger, I go, all
Yeah.
right, Case, what are you needing right now? And 90% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
it's my biological needs. It's what Lila's needing.
Yeah.
It's hydration, sleep in the form of rest, food, movement, and breathing. That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I run through that checklist and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel better now. So we just, we literally, if you can kind of meet yourself with that same grace of like, are my basic biological needs met? Because when all of those things are met, your nervous system is stable and our ability to do anything becomes so much easier. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm trying to run through something and I'm hungry and I haven't exercised in 5 hours, I'm not going to be as effective or present. And so,
Oh, I know. I'm the same way. Well, like my fiance will come home and he's like, and I'll be like, I'm hungry. He's like, well, what did you eat today? And I'm like, oh, I had like carrots, or I skipped lunch and breakfast, or I didn't have the basic things to make me feel good throughout the day. And then because tying it back to your podcast, because I love the name of it, we don't slow the F down, and we just continue to push and say we have to get this done. And that's something I've been struggling with the past couple of months, is like meeting this. And I feel like as entrepreneurs, we do this all the time, where we put this fake deadline on ourselves. We have to get this done. Like, I mean, I have like a kind of a real deadline, but it's also me stressing myself out because my fiance is going to have knee surgery, so he's not going to be working here. So I'm like, I gotta get all this stuff done and ready. Like, so, but I'm like, it's okay, it'll happen. And like you said it before, it's easier said than done sometimes. But getting in that habit and that practice, and I love that, checking in with yourself a couple of times a day, because not enough people do it.
no, we're just like big toddlers.
Yes. Oh my God.
We are, honestly. We lie, we say we're adults, but we're actually just big toddlers. And if we would just like love ourselves and show up with that grace as we do, as we treat, little, like as we treat little ones or little versions of ourselves, would be a lot better off, in my
I
opinion.
think that's such good advice, especially, yes, I have nothing extra to add, because that is very much on point. We are all toddlers, and we all forget to meet our basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the ability as adults to meet them ourselves. Like as
Right.
kids, they don't know or can't get to something if they need a snack.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
But I love that. And I know we've been talking for a while, and I think that, is there anything else you want to leave with our audience? Anything we maybe didn't get to cover? I'm going to share your links and your resources below in the description for anyone watching. If they want to get a hold of you and stay connected with you, those will all be in the description. But is there anything maybe we didn't cover that you think is important, or you're feeling and compelled to share before we sign off?
We covered a lot of the really important stuff. I would say that that last piece is really important, with meeting yourself with the grace of that you would a loved one or a toddler, or someone that you really care about. And I'm also not oversimplifying human emotion. In that example, it's just how am I feeling? What need is underneath that? And there are real needs that come up under that, like beyond that, I should say, even after your biological needs are met. And so when it comes to sensuality, when it comes to healthy sensuality, healthy sexuality, there are a lot more deeper needs
Oh yeah, because we didn't even cover, I feel like that
Yeah,
deeper part of it. Like we were talking about just the basics of getting to that point too.
right. Well, and honestly, even though I work with people who want to, have more fun during sex or feel more like themselves during sex, 100% of the time, we actually start in the same trajectory that you and I just talked about, which is meeting your basic biological needs, finding
Mhm.
safety, because you have to regulate your nervous system first.
Right.
And so I think that would be my takeaway is like, you can absolutely get to a place where you're having intimacy and participating in sex in a way that is fun, in a way that
Yeah.
feels like you, in a way that you have that connection. And everyone that I coach just wants those same things. It doesn't matter of gender, sexuality, age, they all want those same things. And it is possible. You got to regulate the nervous system first. And you got to kind of do these first steps. And then once you do, all of that stuff is so much more accessible. And so if it's feeling inaccessible to you right now, that's fine. It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense because that foundational piece needs to be developed first, and then you can get into it.
And I think also what you said too earlier on is you are worthy of having that type of intimacy, and
Yes.
you are worthy of, like, it is possible for you to have intimacy that you enjoy. And it's there's no reason for you to not have it.
Yeah.
And like you said, just getting through the basics. But I did want to point that out too, of tying it back to the 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 worthiness, because I feel like a lot of people don't feel like they are, and I wanted to remind them too.
I love that reminder. It's 1,000% the truth. And it's totally possible. I mean, here I am,
Mhm.
what, 4 or 5 years later after feeling totally numb, and I'm a healthy sensuality coach. I am
Yes.
able to have fun, safe, exciting um, relationships and intimacy and ask for what I want, ask for what I need. Oh my, that stuff was so
Mhm.
far outside of my like the realm of possibility of my life. So it is possible. And if you're unsure of where to start with that too,
Yeah.
in my link, I do free consultations where we can just jump on and get you the support that you need, whatever that looks like. And I'm happy
Yes.
to do that.
Yes. Everyone should, if you are feeling like you have questions, or you're like, this episode gave you like a couple of aha moments of, putting things into perspective, please reach out to Casey. She is a great resource. And like we talked about in the episode of having a support team, she could be a part of your support team, or know someone to put you in touch as part of a support team, because she has plenty of connections in that space and can help you in many ways. So I think that's a great reminder as well too.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened with the camera, but there we
Mhm.
go.
Mhm.
That's
Oh,
okay.
sweet Lila.
I know she fell asleep for a little bit there, but now she's back up for the end. You're back up for the end.
Back up for the end.
Oh no. But okay. I don't know what happened here. It's all blurry. Does it look blurry on your side?
Yeah, it just got
Yeah.
a little blur. It looks like the camera is a little bit out of focus there. I'll let you know if it. Did you touch the lens? Because sometimes that makes it blurry, like if you wipe it off.
I didn't. I mean, I just now did, but that's weird. We'll have to just edit that part out. That's okay.
Okay.
That's okay. I
Yeah.
am so appreciative of you coming on today, and thank you for joining us and sharing everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the awesome conversation and thanks for everything that you're doing.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
I
It's
mean,
nice to see other people join and get involved.
yeah. Yeah. It's important because I mean, my hope is that people listening here felt heard or seen in some extent and
Mhm.
felt permission to support themselves or get support in a way that works for them and feels aligned. Because that's what this is all about. We're all in this together, and we all have our little nuggets of wisdom to share, and that's how we get through life.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Casey.
yeah. Thank you for having me, and Lila, thank you for your baby emotional support.